anyone just joining us now, we're just hanging out for a few minutes here before we get started. We're talking about Tracy is going to maybe pull the trigger on getting beautiful.ai, at least a trial to see if you can start using AI to create presentations. We were talking about this the other day as part of our prep for today's webinar, because Tracy, I'm sure you're like me, don't like anything to do with creating decks.
Yeah. Well, they do too. They're very time consuming, I think. And this, even just like from a chart perspective and, if it can make all those beautiful images and you don't have to task your graphic designer to go do it, like, I think that most graphic designers don't get jazzed about doing, slide decks.
Yeah, for sure.
In general.
Yeah. And I've only played around a little bit with it. We don't yet make our decks with those. We may very well after this conversation, but I do think some of the like auto formatting things are really helpful, because I just find myself like buried in minutia of formatting with a deck, just like tweaking little things, making sure everything's aligned. So that's been really helpful in my tests of it.
Well, I was telling Mike that I have a presentation next week, and the text on all the slides, picture perfect. Now I need to design them. And it's like a perfect case study for dumping all of that and beautiful and saying, can you just make this pretty for me?
Right.
I do find that when I do a deck for like a talk or something like that, I find that the most time consuming piece is like literally coming up with the imagery. And I like to do like full bleed to the edge, with my image and have very few words on there. And so it's just that sort of takes the most time, because you want to find the right image to sort of convey that message. And so if this can save some time, I'm all in for that.
For sure. For anyone just joining us, we're just chatting briefly for another minute or two here as people trickle in. We'll probably get started in about 60 seconds or so here.
So for everyone, if this is your first time joining us for Marketing AI Institute webinar, welcome. This is our second AI for CMOs webinar, our second iteration of this blueprint, and I'm really excited about it. It's one of those that I'm like, how much has changed in a year? Obviously, we know that much has changed in the past 6 months, but I really love this blueprint that Mike wrote, and I'm thrilled that Tracy is here to join us with her expertise, both from the tech side as well as the CMO side.
All right, given that, let's dive in here. So welcome, everyone. Obviously, we are here to talk about a really important subject for marketing leaders, AI for CMOs. This webinar is the real-world blueprint for AI-powered digital transformation. Now, we've got a packed session today. We have a lot of actionable information, so we'll just dive right into it in a second here. But before we do, I wanted to give a little more context about AI for CMOs and also today's presenters with us here today. So first up, AI for CMOs. This webinar is actually based on our AI for CMOs report that launches today in partnership with our friends at Intellimize. Intellimize is an experience optimization and personalization SaaS platform that actually uses AI to dynamically personalize website experiences across the entire buyer's journey. So they are deep in this space, building technology with real-world marketing use cases. Now, the report itself, which you'll get as part of your webinar attendance, we'll send you an ungated copy of the full report afterwards. This report has everything that CMOs need to get started with AI, and that includes things like clear, actionable definitions of the technology, sample use cases, examples from real-world CMOs, how they're using AI, and a practical playbook for how to scale AI in your company. Now, we should note this report is in its second edition. And like Cathy had mentioned, the first edition came out midway through 2022. And the world of AI has just changed at light speed since then. So we've fully updated this report with largely brand new content, including interviews with 14 CMOs and marketing leaders. So like I mentioned, you'll get a copy of the report ungated after the webinar as part of your signing up for this webinar. Now, and for anyone who doesn't know myself and our panelists here, my name is Mike Kaput. I am the Chief Content Officer here at Marketing AI Institute. I'm joined by my colleague, Cathy McPhillips, our Chief Growth Officer. And we are very lucky to have with us Tracy Sestili, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Intellimize. So Before we dive in, we have a ton of new people in our audience in the last year, given how much AI has taken off. So I really wanted to reintroduce and take a quick second to talk about what we do at Marketing AI Institute. So we are a media, event, education, and consulting business. And our whole job is to make AI accessible, approachable, and actionable for marketers and business leaders around the world. We have been in business way back since 2016, well before ChatGPT, generative AI, and we've been since then an industry-leading source of education and guidance, helping people build smarter businesses with AI. We are able to do that because we spun out of a marketing agency where we were actively using artificial intelligence to supercharge our business and the businesses of our clients. Now, fast forward to today, we are on track to have about 400,000 people visit our site this year. We've got more than 40,000 business leaders subscribing to our content, and thousands of people have taken one of our free or paid AI classes, online education. They've joined our online community or attended one of our events, including our annual Marketing AI conference here in Cleveland. That conference is happening again this year in about a month, July 26th to the 28th. And I'll give a few more details at the end about that if you're interested. All right, so on the agenda today, we're going to talk through what is the AI opportunity for CMOs. What is a really actionable introduction to the technology for marketing leaders? What use cases should you consider? And then what are some challenges and concerns that CMOs like you or leaders need to be thinking about? And last but not least, we're going to dive into Q&A and discussion at the end. I'll stop sharing my screen. We'll jump back on video, and we'll facilitate some questions and discussion with Tracy around AI from the perspective of an acting CMO. And we'll also answer some of the audience questions. So feel free to drop those in the chat or in the Q&A, and Cathy on our team will be looking at those questions as they come in. All right, let's get started. What is the AI opportunity today for CMOs? The world of CMOs today can really be summed up in basically 4 simple words. Do more with less. I mean, we're seeing effects of inflation hitting businesses hard. Budgets are facing scrutiny. And unfortunately, in many sectors, layoffs are reducing headcount and making it very hard for marketing leaders to do their jobs. In fact, some recent research from Gartner shows that 75% of CMOs are facing pressure to get more results with fewer resources in order to deliver profitable growth in 2023. What's more, a whopping 86% of this group say that they need to make, quote, significant changes to how the marketing function works in order to do that. What's really clear here is that in this climate, keeping the status quo is just not an option. And honestly, it's no wonder so many CMOs are starting to pay attention to artificial intelligence. That's because AI offers this promise of productivity and performance at scale. We've seen it allow even smaller teams to dramatically increase the quality and the volume of their marketing output, as well as open up levels of prediction and personalization that were previously impossible with standard software. Now, today, we're actually seeing marketing teams achieving pretty breathtaking results using AI and generative AI tools. And these results are really forcing the entire market to fundamentally rethink how marketing works. Think about how marketing can be done in a fundamentally smarter way using artificial intelligence. Now, I want to show you Exhibit A of what I'm talking about. This is an example from a business professor at the Wharton School named Ethan Mollick. And he used AI to actually build an entire marketing campaign from scratch in 30 minutes on his own. He ran an experiment. He gave himself 30 minutes to achieve as much as he could as possible on this single project. And the project was to market the launch of a new fictional educational game. He said AI would do all the work. I would just offer directions. And what it accomplished, he described as superhuman. In 30 minutes, it did the following. It did market research, created a positioning document, wrote an email campaign, created a website, created a logo, created a hero shot graphic, made a social media campaign for multiple platforms, and scripted and created a video. He actually quantified the output as about 9,200 words of text and a couple of images, a working HTML and CSS file, 12 images generated from an AI image generation tool, a voice file created by an AI audio generation tool, and a movie that an AI video generation tool created. And he is not some coding whiz. He used less than 20 inputs and prompts to get the system to do all of this. Now, this is just one example, and he kind of set up this fictional exercise, but it really shows you that we have an exponential change in what is possible from a productivity and performance perspective when it comes to marketing assets. And for everyone out there just kind of getting up to speed on artificial intelligence, I'm here to tell you that ChatGPT is really just the beginning, the tip of the iceberg. ChatGPT is super important. Generative AI is a huge category of artificial intelligence that is worth paying attention to, but it's just the beginning. AI technology has been quietly growing in power and scale for the last decade. And this has largely happened behind the scenes, which is why it feels like some of these tools have come just exploded out of nowhere in the last year. For the most part, CMOs are now just seeing this tip of the iceberg of what's coming. So generative AI alone has the potential to change how we do our work, but AI as a whole has far, far bigger implications across every major area of marketing. So before we look at those applications of AI across every area of marketing, including generative AI, let's really quickly level set on what we're actually talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence. One of our favorite definitions of AI comes from Demis Hassabis, who co-founded and is the CEO of DeepMind, which is a company acquired by Google that forms the backbone of their AI efforts. And he says that, quote, AI is the science of making machines smart. But what does being smart actually mean? Well, the traditional software, by which I mean non-AI software that we all use every day in marketing work, is really, really limited. It only follows strict rules and instructions, both from the programmer that created it and the marketer using it. Like in every case you're using the software, you have to tell a machine what to do. The machine then goes and executes your instructions exactly how you said to do it. This unfortunately creates a lot of manual labor. Now, make no mistake, like I'd rather have traditional software than no software, but it still requires a lot of work. You still have to set everything up yourself, especially as a marketer. You're still creating all the assets. You're building and organizing the lists. You're structuring workflows, rules, logic, and you're creating the plans that the machine follows. And when the software is done doing what you told it to do, you just end up repeating the process all over again. Software, traditional software at least, doesn't tell you what to improve or change or what strategy to use next. It's basically dumb. Any change to the plan that you follow must come from you or your team. You're inherently limited by the amount of brain power your team can throw at a problem. Now, artificial intelligence is fundamentally different in this way. It actually has the power to figure out on its own how to achieve the goals that you set. It can, in some cases, determine its own pathways to achieve those goals without human direct involvement. And once it does its job, it can actually learn and improve on its own without your direct instruction so that it gets better at achieving your goal over time. In this way, it is not just following instructions, it's actually augmenting human intelligence. So when we talk about, yes.
Go back to that for a second. I think, one thing that it took me a minute to understand when I first was diving into this is that you're still doing a lot of the stuff. When you're using AI, there is still a human involved in many, many points within this process.
Yes.
It's taking your brain, your strategy, and helping you do it better, faster, more efficiently. So it's not like one or the other.
Yeah, at no point are we talking about hitting a button and AI magically goes and does everything on its own. We're talking about it makes things fundamentally possible that were impossible with traditional software. At every stage of these checkboxes, humans are involved, guiding and redirecting machines in whatever ways they see fit. So when we are talking about this term AI, we're really using this as an umbrella term. It's all these different tools and techniques that make machines smart in the way that we just talked about. So I'm not going to throw a bunch of other terms at you, but I'm just going to mention a few that are relevant and necessary to understand briefly as you kind of go down this path of learning more about AI. The first one is machine learning. This is the core subset of artificial intelligence. It involves literally teaching machines how to achieve goals. So once we teach a machine how to achieve a goal using our training data, it can then go accomplish that goal on new data it hasn't seen before. What's more, it can then learn to improve its performance on new data over time. So within machine learning, there's also a highly advanced subset called deep learning. Deep learning isn't just about making machines learn and making machines smart. It's making machines that can do human-like tasks, machines that can read, that can write, that can speak, that can understand. And that's really where we get into where we are today. Two terms that you might have heard are really important types of this deep learning. There's large language models, or LLMs, and generative AI. Large language models are just deep learning models that are trained to understand language. You may have heard about these. I mean, things like GPT-4 from OpenAI, Palm from Google, Llama from Meta, these are all LLMs. Once trained, LLMs can then be used in many different generative AI applications. And when we talk about generative AI, we're really talking about any type of AI that can produce content on its own. Now, that can include text, images, audio, code, 3D, and more. LLMs are used in these generative AI tools that deal with language. So things that are like writing for you, the ChatGPTs of the world. Other models can be used to power other generative AI that creates like non-language outputs, like images. So really the only point here is to understand kind of how all these pieces fit together and what we're really talking about when we say AI, LLMs, generative AI, et cetera. Now, like I mentioned, generative AI is not the only type of AI, but it is one of the biggest, fastest growing kind of categories. So it's well worth paying attention to. We just don't want to put blinders on because there are hundreds of use cases for AI for CMOs that are outside of generative AI as well. So I want to get into a few of these use cases, the common ones, both with generative AI and non-generative AI. So today, AI can begin to transform every major aspect of your marketing organization by making it more intelligent. In fact, we're already seeing some of the world's best brands use AI to achieve a range of business outcomes that lead directly to results that all of our executives, stakeholders, board members care about. Things like accelerating revenue growth, driving costs down, getting more actionable insights from marketing data, predicting consumer needs, reducing the time spent on repetitive tasks, and unlocking greater value from the marketing technologies that we already use. Now, like I mentioned, there's hundreds of ways across every area of marketing to use artificial intelligence. However, there are a handful of core marketing use cases where we see AI making the biggest impact for any CMO. So these are areas of marketing where AI is available commercially today and can help you improve performance quickly. Now, I'm going to go through a few of these major categories and some of the use cases, but I do encourage you, once we send out the guide, to fully dive into that. There's plenty of content that is not in this presentation, and I'm not covering all the use cases and areas of marketing included in the guide. We've got dozens and dozens of possible use cases. First up is AI in advertising. This is a huge use case for AI. AI can do things like analyze your advertising performance, allocate budget to the right audiences and channels, manage and adjust that budget automatically, You can use AI to predict which ads will work before you even launch them. You can obviously write ads and ad copy with AI. And interestingly, you can do things like scale a piece of creative across platforms and regions. There's an AI tool called Celtra that actually will take one piece of ad creative and spin it off into different variations for different sizes, formats, and channels. If you're doing something like that manually today, you should probably be looking into AI to help. Content marketing obviously is a huge area given the strides forward in generative AI. So no matter what type of content you're creating today, there's no question that AI can help you do it better and faster. But it's not just about generating blog posts, though AI can do that for you. It can do that. It can write social posts for you. It can create images, audio, video, but it can also do interesting things like personalized content recommendations for each and every website user that comes to your site. It can even personalize the right language to the right users in every marketing message. There's a tool called Persado that actually will do that. It will personalize your copy, your ads, your posts to have the exact words that resonate with an individual, and it will give different language to different people that see your messages.
Mike, can I touch on that one?
Of course.
Persado, and I had a question with them a while back about, okay, we can do that with segmenting our lists and doing different variations on the copy based on, where we bucket those folks. And they were like, oh, wait, you don't need to make the lists. They just pull all of that from the data that's in the system. And I was like, okay, that's the AI. And that helped me better understand how we still take our strategy, but then it does it for us. Just takes a step out of the equation.
That's exactly right. And you can also be using artificial intelligence here. One other kind of big area of marketing, I would say, is customer experience. It's admittedly broad, but a category that's on everybody's mind. Artificial intelligence, through that kind of personalization that we just talked about with Persado, with content, can also be used to do things like analyze data to improve the experience quality of individual customers on your website. You can be using AI to answer questions, solicit feedback, and even give up intelligent searches for customers. You can get customers to the right resources, content, and products quicker by analyzing what they're looking for, making predictions about what they're looking for next. You can personalize messaging and offers, especially, we see this a lot in, e-commerce, personalizing the exact ad, the exact CTA button, the exact product being offered to individual customers based on their behavior. And the last big area I'll cover here is email marketing. Now, there are many, many others, but email marketing is one that I think has a lot of low-hanging fruit for any marketer, because you can do a lot of really cool things. You can personalize email content for individual prospects. You can personalize email send times to individual prospects. There's a tool called 7th Sense that does this, where it will look at the historical email engagement behavior of everyone in your database and send an email at the exact time that individual person tends to open emails. You can also use it to write subject lines at scale. There are tools out there that will create hundreds of variations of subject lines and test all of them. Now, as part of this report, we spoke, like I said, with 14 CMOs and marketing executives about how they're using artificial intelligence. So they told us exact tools that they were looking to use or that they were already using in their own operations. So I wanted to share just a logoscape of a few of these on the next 2 slides. Note that we have not used all of these tools personally. We're not necessarily endorsing them. These are just what CMOs have told us they're using as kind of inspiration for you as you go about your own work for things to look at. Tools like Adobe is a really good example, because obviously Adobe is an existing platform. Adobe already has amazing generative AI features that are being baked into it. Things like generative fill, which literally allows you to edit photos and images using text prompts, which just takes out all the need to learn super involved commands with an editing program. This is a great example because the existing technology that you're already using may have very powerful AI features. As the market moves forward, looking at the existing tech you already have paid for is a really good first step, because a lot of your platforms are baking in generative AI or other AI features. Other existing platforms like Canva, a lot of people use Canva to do basic design work. However, not everyone knows they also are starting to include generative AI features.
I think that's a good thing to talk about, Mike, is that many of the tools that we're already using may have AI components that are new, like you said, or we're actually using AI and don't even realize it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you haven't looked at the current capabilities of your existing technology in a while, it is well worth looking at, because a lot of these tools have added this stuff, honestly, probably in the last 3 months, I would say. And then some other interesting tools people have told us they are relying on, things like Grammarly, which many people know about, but has pretty robust AI that just, it's kind of unsexy use cases for editing and tone and grammar, but it really dramatically reduces the amount of time it takes to create content. And then our friends at Intellimize. I mean, if you're doing any type of optimization, you really need to be using AI to get the most out of the tests that you are doing and the experiments you're doing to increase your performance. As part of the research, we also asked CMOs for specific use cases that they were using across different areas of marketing. Now, a lot of these are generative. As people start dipping their toe in the water, generative AI is really easy to get started with. They include things like creating internal communications and reports, building buyer personas, drafting emails, doing gap analysis, creating social, creating visual creative assets, interestingly, personalizing the customer journey, predicting which accounts are in market, and then doing things to support the content creation process, like research assistant or content summarization. These are all ways that CMOs we talked to have reported using AI tools today. Now, when you look at the different use cases for AI for CMOs, really everything falls into one of two buckets, and it's a really helpful frame as you think about how to use AI in your own business and your own career. You want to look at how can AI actually reduce costs, either through increasing efficiency or boosting team productivity, or how can AI increase revenue? And oftentimes that happens by using AI to increase conversion rates and create revenue uplift. And multiple CMOs mentioned that they were using AI for that purpose today. Now, AI adoption, despite all the benefits that you can get from it, is not easy. The leaders that we spoke to cited often a common set of challenges, concerns that were related to AI as they kind of went about trying to understand, pilot, and use the technology. Now, the reason we have this section in here and in the report is to just acknowledge the truth, which is this stuff is not always easy. And no matter who you are or who you work for or what your background is, no one institute, company, or person has all the answers. We can certainly help guide people in the right direction, but what's really needed is CMOs and leaders getting together and having conversations and asking the right questions about the challenges and concerns out there, and even just having conversations where they realize other people have similar challenges and concerns. So we really see this section as facilitating that both during today's session and hopefully afterwards, as either part of our community or amongst yourselves, talking through how others are trying to approach and solve these challenges. The first is simply just keeping up with everything. Keeping up with everything related to AI is a monumental challenge. I mean, AI is advancing at light speed. The last year has easily felt like 10 in terms of developments. And several leaders told us that they just struggle to stay on top of all the AI tools that are available and all of their capabilities. Now, on top of this, unfortunately, since ChatGPT has come out, we've seen the rise of, let's call them online influencers who have become overnight AI experts, and they create a lot of noise that makes it really hard to know who and what to trust. Many, many leaders said they're really struggling with this. Ethical and legal considerations. You could do an entire webinar or write an entire book on this topic. It was interesting. More than one person that we interviewed referred to AI today by the very specific words, quote, wild, wild west. Leaders are really struggling with this lack of current regulations around the technology. There's lack of clarity and guidance. And a lot of them are really struggling in understanding if they can use the technology in their business based on regulatory or privacy concerns, as well as if they can, how do they actually use it responsibly? Also, leaders are struggling to create policies to govern the internal use of AI by their employees. And they worry about using AI in a way that doesn't violate copyright. Data and privacy concerns go hand in hand with the previous slide. Leaders are treading really carefully, rightly so, when it comes to giving AI tools access to sensitive data. And also they're trying to figure out how to use AI in a way that respects customer privacy, as well as obviously legal customer privacy protections. Now, one kind of horror story to start coming out of this is Samsung workers accidentally leaked trade secrets via ChatGPT. These are very smart people, but the problem is it's moving so fast, we don't know what we don't know. In the case of Samsung, a few employees who were encouraged to use ChatGPT were very excited to test it out at work. They were developers, so they dropped in some code and asked ChatGPT to debug it. They were really amazed. It did a great job. However, they didn't realize at the time the version of ChatGPT they were using stored the prompts on OpenAI servers. So whoops, we have accidentally given a third party what is very likely confidential, secure, and private code from Samsung. Now, I don't know what happened to the workers, but it was not a good look for them or for Samsung. However, again, it's very easy to make those types of mistakes given how fast the technology moves and the lack of questions we're asking around data and privacy concerns. We have to address the elephant in the room, fear. I mean, everyone, even us, like we have anxieties around certain aspects of AI. A lot of people have fear. At least one leader said that their team was afraid that AI would negatively impact their jobs and roles. Now, this leader had not been widely rolling out AI. They just started talking about it. And the first concern on everyone's mind was, will AI take my job? No matter what aspect of AI you're testing, what level of transformation you're at, you have to acknowledge the fact that no matter what you think about AI, how excited you might be about it, or what you know about it, your staff, your teams, your colleagues might not have the same baseline level of knowledge. It is critically important to have conversations early and often about the fact that you are not trying to take away jobs with AI, nor should you be trying to. That is a bad strategy, but also educating people and demystifying artificial intelligence to show your teams how it's actually an augmentation tool, not one to automate people away. Some other leaders also told us how difficult change management could be. I mean, it's just very, very hard, even if your teams are excited, to get them onboarded with AI effectively and quickly. How will AI impact buying behavior? That's a question that is on a lot of CMOs' minds. One agency CMO said, quote, I don't have enough data or insights into when AI will be broadly adopted and how that will affect marketing. He went on to specifically talk about AI's impact on organic search. If we're using generative search through Bard or Bing or ChatGPT to get information, how will that change things like top of the funnel organic search? I mean, there's a lot of commentary out there, increasingly more commentary, which is good, because some of these tools are going to very quickly change our traditional strategies as they relate to buyer behavior. It will quickly change consumer consumption patterns in ways that are very, very hard right now to predict, but that we at least have to acknowledge are possibilities. Accuracy is a major concern on everybody's mind. I mean, AI makes plenty of mistakes. ChatGPT is a really, really good example here. ChatGPT does what we call hallucination. It makes things up And it makes things up in a really, really convincing way. I mean, we've had many experiments we've run where ChatGPT has written things for us or created things for us or answered questions for us in very convincing ways that if we weren't ready to spot inaccuracies, we might actually go ahead and use the content. Now, one example, I was actually playing with it the other day and asked it to give me a list of 10 peer-reviewed studies on some topic. It gave me the studies with proper citation of authors and links. The problem was only like half the studies were real. None of the links worked. And the other half were made up. So it can be very easy, if you're not paying attention, to get hoodwinked by some of these tools. Now, we all probably are aware of that. But again, going back to the fear idea, your staff might not be. People might not realize that just because things sound good doesn't mean they're true. On everyone's mind is AI's impact on hiring. Like, how are strategies going to change? Now, we didn't have a lot of common conclusions here from the people we talked to. Some of them seemed to say that they would be changing their strategies. Others were staying the course. In one case, the tech CMO told us, our strategy is not really changing. We still need the same people, but their expectations change. We should expect more productivity from them in certain cases. Others, however, are kind of totally upending their hiring practices. We had one CMO tell us she's now on the hunt for, quote, AI whisperers, and finding them is critical to her strategy moving forward. Some are looking at things like finding people who are good at prompting, people who are really good at leveraging AI from an ideation standpoint. That seemed to be very important, being able to get the most out of the tools out there. What was really fascinating to me in this research was that CMOs don't just, they don't just expect experienced marketing hires to now have AI skills, though they do. The expectations around new hires seem to have changed as well. One CMO told us that new graduates just have to be skilled in AI, regardless of seniority level. However, not everything's going to change. One other CMO told us, quote, strategy, measurement, sales, consulting, training, and making people feel special. These are the jobs that are still in demand. So while we are making marketing more intelligent and more data-driven through AI, those human skills are going to still matter, and if not still matter, be even more valuable. Now, how will AI impact strategy? Really, I think the key here that came out of what we researched is speed. I mean, like you see from this quote here, strategy will still be driven by the CMO, but AI will allow for faster testing and learning, speed to failure, and course correction. So as we're looking at our strategies, our ability to iterate, test, and learn has just exponentially increased. And that is going to have a massive effect on expectations, how fast you're moving, how fast the timelines are for executing strategies, and also your entire direction. So several leaders told us they're paying very close attention to how AI is changing content marketing strategies specifically, likely due to this big rise in generative AI. One marketing leader told us, quote, now that anyone can spin up an ebook or a 1,500-word blog post in minutes, I believe it's imperative that our content be more human, opinionated, and interactive. So the very content we create, the very nature of it will likely change dramatically now that we have tools that can do this baseline content for us. So I want to wrap up here by just imploring you that regardless of what stage you're at, what level you're at, what level of knowledge, interest, or excitement, or fear about artificial intelligence, we really all have to come together and understand that it's time to become a next-gen marketing leader. We as CMOs and leaders are in a rare position to create change, to reinvent what it means to actually do marketing. And we do not have to be machine learning experts or data scientists to take advantage of what AI tools enable right now. We just need to understand what's possible with these technologies and apply that to our businesses and careers. Now, here's the reality. I mean, as fast as things are moving, it's possible still that tomorrow, look, your career, your strategies, your tasks, your budgets, your tech stack, your challenges will look a lot like today. And next week, they'll be similar to the week before. But as we get more and more into this AI revolution, month by month, year by year, the marketing industry and profession are slowly going to change. And then suddenly they're going to look nothing like they do today. Now, we say become a next-gen marketing leader, not to define next-gen as an age or a generation, but rather as a holistic approach to embracing change and applying smarter technologies. So as a next-gen marketing leader, no matter what type of leader you are, what level you're at in your career, next-gen marketing leaders use AI to deliver the personalization and experiences that modern consumers expect. They unlock previously unimaginable creative possibilities, and they use AI to drive efficiency, revenue growth, profits, and societal impact that the rest of the C-suite demands. So I'll leave you with this question. Will you embrace this change? Will you commit to unlocking your true potential in your company and career? And will you choose to become a next-gen marketing leader? Now, if this is of interest to you, one of the quickest ways to do it is to join us in July, the end of July, July 26th to the 28th, in Cleveland, Ohio, where we are headquartered at our marketing AI conference, MAICON, www.maicon.ai. MAICON is quite simply the leading marketing AI event on the planet. I would argue we're going to have hundreds and hundreds of marketing leaders, just like you, and AI experts, just perhaps like some of you, joining us in person to share knowledge, case studies, best practices, and tools and recommendations to accelerate all of us together to become much better marketers, much better humans, and next-gen leaders. And as a thank you for listening to us and taking the time, you can use AI for CMOs 100 for $100 off on MAICON if you go to www.maicon.ai. Now, I am going to stop sharing. We'll jump on video Q&A, and we are going to answer some questions and have a great discussion.
We've got some really good questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. So before we get into the questions, Tracy, Intellimize uses artificial intelligence, an AI-powered tool. Do you just want to give a quick overview of how the AI works in your technology?
Sure. I mean, I think we sort of, I mean, I think Mike gave a really good overview of that, but I think that we basically drive people when we spend all this money as CMOs driving people to the website, right? And as a result of that, we need to figure out how to optimize that experience because we basically treat people the same. And I think that tools like Intellimize, for example, when we give people that experience, we're basically giving you the right, messaging or image or placement of a button or, the layout of the page for the ones that will convert the most. And so when you set up these experiences for your customers, the ones that aren't working so well, we actually starve the traffic from going to those experiences. And instead, the AI automatically says, hey, these are the experiences that are converting more. But there are still people that convert on the ones that aren't doing so well, and you're still going to serve it maybe to those. But the ones that are getting the highest conversion rate is where we send people.
Awesome. So Intellimize aside, or maybe you're doing this in your role today and in your previous roles, what has been the biggest challenge you've seen regarding tech adoption, the organizations you've worked with, and how should CMOs approach selecting technology, purchasing, onboarding?
I mean, as a CMO, just like you select any other tool in your tech stack, I think you should take the same, approach when selecting an AI-powered tech, right? Like, does it check all the boxes? Does it solve the problem you're trying to solve for? Is it easy to use? Is it the right price point? And then you have to ask yourself, like, who's going to own that tool? Because just because, I think, Mike alluded to this earlier, it's an AI doesn't mean it's going to run itself, right? It still requires a human, human input or guidance. Even ChatGPT, right, requires you to put in prompts, right? But also, I think as a CMO, I don't think you need to get into the weeds to understand the inner workings of natural language processing or the logic behind the machine learning of how these tools, work in the weeds. I think as a CMO, having a basic understanding is good enough. And I think you have your team, you empower your team to test. You really have to have a testing mindset. And encourage your team to test the tools out, figure out which ones drive efficiencies, because at the end of the day, in marketing, we need to drive efficiencies to be more effective. But all of those things help us reach our overall goals. And that's really what you're looking for in the tool, right? Of how it's helping you with your strategy. Is it driving more pipeline? Is it lowering acquisition costs? Is it driving revenue? Like all those examples that Mike gave. So I think that that's really how you have to approach it.
Yep, I agree. On that note, Mike, how are you finding time in your day or in your week to test new tools? Are you allotting a certain amount of time each week? Which I feel like I know the answer to that question. But how do you think CMOs are or should be prioritizing getting started?
Yeah, it's a hard question because I assume I'm not alone by saying that I don't have enough hours in the day to even do one job, much less many jobs, including like a full-time, AI tester. I don't know if I have an easy answer here. Like, I think you just got to make the time because there's a lot of other things that are demanding on your time, some of which you probably need to do. But there's plenty, you got to make cuts somewhere because this could not be more important to understand now. You don't have to do everything all at once. I think a really helpful resource are things like, we try in our newsletter to cut through some of the noise, offer tools to people to look at that we've actually profiled. There's other newsletters out there that round up different tools that are can at least get you started to say, okay, I don't need to just go randomly Google different AI tools. I always find it really helpful to really make it tangible. I mean, it's a lot easier to make time for a use case when I say, wow, I'm just going to try out AI for a use case on something that's giving me a huge problem at work that is going to cause me a lot of time or pain to do. I mean, that becomes inherently more motivating. If I can solve for this, I'll never have to worry about it again. Now, it doesn't always work that way, but it at least gets you motivated to start trying out different tools.
Right. You mentioned newsletters and finding some resources for roundups and things like that to save you some legwork. I'll start with Tracy, and I would like your answer too, Mike. This came up in the chat quite a bit about there's so much noise out there. So how are you able to find the right resources to know if someone is just trying to jump on the bandwagon to make a quick buck, or if there are some experts that really are spending time investing in these tools and genuinely want to help us get better at what we're doing? Do you have like a list of folks that you follow or news outlets that you follow?
You want me to take this one first?
Yeah, who was that for?
Go ahead, either of you. Mike, go ahead.
Mike,
If it's on the tip of your tongue, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's been a long and arduous process. That's like one of the reasons we created the Institute, is so that you don't have to spend like 5+ years figuring this out for yourself. Hopefully we can accelerate some of your journey. In terms of, there's hundreds of different people you could follow. We can provide some Twitter lists that, Paul and I have created, but I would say actually, I would rather give some advice on like who not to follow. I mean, anyone who's offering easy answers is trying to aggressively sell you something. People that think it's just ChatGPT, just prompting, or just like how to get more out of like Mid-Journey, those are all helpful. Like there's no harm in looking at that stuff, but all those like tweet threads about that, I'd avoid it personally. It's missing the point. One newsletter that's not ours that I really like is called Ben's Bites. It's got like daily AI tool roundups. I don't know if they're testing all of them, but it's at least a good place to start where you can say, oh, okay, that one looks pretty good. I'm going to go try that out.
I mean, I do think that it's information overload for CMOs, right? Like, I think one thing that I have found helpful is, there's the Marketing AI Institute Slack channel. There's a number of CMOs in there that test things out and talk about things, and it's not super overwhelming. But I would say that, I agree with Mike. Like, I think part of the thing too is like AI is really supposed to make it shouldn't seem complicated, right? Like when you go to look at a tool, because if it is, and it probably is, like it should be easy to use from the end user perspective. And so, I don't think that when people tell you that it's easy to use, like try it. Like, is it easy to use, right? I mean, does it seem easy to use? Do they have demos on their site? Have you seen a demo of the product? Does it actually work? I mean, those are the things that I think, but I still go back to the initial point, which is you really have to like figure out what are the problems that you're trying to solve within your marketing team. Are you trying to make, sales more efficient? Are you trying to make, your content team more efficient? We use Descript, for example, to transcribe, video, right? So, and that saves, the content team a lot of time, obviously, when we're putting up a new video. So, and, obviously we use our own tool too, but I think that those are the things as a CMO, you really have to look at your overall strategy and where you're trying to, increase the efficiency so that you do hit your end goals.
It's a really
It's
good, it's very hard.
Go ahead.
It's a really good point though, because, while for this webinar and in the report, we're focused on that big picture strategic outlook on artificial intelligence. But when you get in the weeds, I mean, we talk about this quite a bit in some of our other resources. You're looking at, you want narrow, well-defined use cases to start. Yep. You don't just say, AI sounds great, let's apply it to something. I mean, you're headed down the road to disaster. You want something really tangible. Like you mentioned Descript, Tracy, like we use it as well for our podcast. It wasn't even let's use Descript to create the podcast. That's too vague. It was let's use Descript. Let's solve for creating a decent transcript in as little time as possible. And let's solve for being able, can we edit audio and video without a professional editing team? That was very specific use cases, very easy to get to kind of a yes or a no, or if yes, what tools should we look at?
Yeah,
yes, I think also a little bit this morning about, as CMOs, there's these overarching, we're trying to solve some problems, but there also are use cases within each of those problems. So instead of just saying, oh, let's use it to write some tweets, or let's use it to do this, is it going to solve part of the bigger overarching business problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
So, okay. To have one more CMO question, then I'll jump to some more of the audience questions. How do you think CMOs could get a seat at the table to ensure they're in the conversation? CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, all these people are in these meetings about technology, and the marketers, the CMOs are the ones using them. Like how can we ensure that we are in those conversations?
I mean, I think the role of the CMO has evolved quite a bit over the past 10 years. Like the CMO is required to not only know how the tools, know all of the tools, but know how to use them and how to drive revenue and create value for the business. I think one of the best things the CMO can do is bring the CIO and the CTO counterparts into the discussion to collaborate with them and get an understanding of the different perspectives that they have and get alignment early on and creating that, holistic sort of technology landscape, right? Without their buy-in, adopting AI tools and getting them rolled out, it becomes an uphill battle the larger the company is. But, I think CMOs have to be the change agent, right, in their MarTech infrastructure. And I think if you bring everybody together in a collaborative way and they understand, what you're trying to achieve in the overall strategy and how that fits into the larger company business strategy, I think that really gets you alignment and gets you a seat at the table.
And with so many things being so much more measurable now, customer acquisition costs, all the things that you mentioned, Tracy, acquisition costs, all these different things, you can go to them and say like, this is working. I think, like you said, 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have the measurement just wasn't there as much as it is now. Mike, do you have anything to add to that question on the CMOs?
No, I think Tracy said it very well, and you added a really good point there. I mean, the measurement thing is just a critical change. So yeah, couldn't agree more.
I mean, I will say one other thing is like at the end of the day, you have to adopt some AI technologies, right, in your tech stack. It gives CMOs a competitive advantage across all of their competitors. And if you're not doing that, then there's going to be somebody else that comes along and does it, one of your competitors that does it as well. So it helps, right? And I think, Mike, you talked about this earlier about the hiring and, understanding people that, it does take people. I think it's not necessarily people that graduate need to know AI. I think people need to know how to use the tools to be efficient, right? And it's all those other soft skills that you mentioned too. So
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's at least from what I've seen so far. Yeah, it's not necessarily that we're looking for a degree or like a concentration in some type of artificial intelligence, though, that would, I'm sure, be great. It's more, have you played around with the tools. Like I wouldn't today be looking, I don't even know if we would seriously consider a candidate that's like, I haven't really gotten around to it.
Right.
Like it's not like you have to know everything or have some be like plugged into the matrix necessarily over here. It's just like, have you used the tools? What have you used them for? What have you learned? Are you experimenting? That kind of experimental mindset is, I think, crucial.
And Mike,
Yeah,
you talked
it is
about it on the
very true.
podcast with Paul about Dan Slagan at tomorrow.io.
Yeah.
And his requirement for hiring someone to do, his AI coordinator or whatever the title is, it was entry level. It was like being excited. It wasn't even like it was a big ask. Like you have a genuine interest and you have the initiative to go out there and we're putting you in charge of bringing us the tools.
Yeah. So Cathy is referencing tomorrow.io is a company that we saw. I don't know if it was the first ever AI marketing specialist job listing, but it's one of the first that we saw. And we talked about it a little bit. And it's essentially like a entry level role, like 1 to 2 years of experience. And it's all the typical things you'd think about a marketing specialist doing. But then half the description is thinking on your own to figure out how to use AI to fundamentally transform and accelerate all the typical stuff we're doing. But what I loved about it was there's one bullet point, which is like a main part of your job is to stay on top of AI developments. Because if someone came to me and said, I'm an expert in AI because of something I studied 4 years ago, it's like, well, sure, you might be. You probably know more than me about that. Like, great. But a lot happens very fast. So part of the job is just experimenting and just staying on top of things.
Yep. Tracy, I think I cut you off when you were about to say something about the job. Okay.
I don't remember. The mind is the first to go.
Yes, that is very true. That is very true. Okay, I'm going to do a rapid fire for the last 5 minutes through these questions. Mike, very early on in the hour, you talked about how AI creates its own rules. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So really the broad idea here is that instead of you saying, okay, if then logic or A/B statements essentially in code, that's still relevant in artificial intelligence. But in a lot of ways, you're essentially giving a machine a goal and saying, hey, go figure it out. That's really what we're talking about there. Is the fundamental difference with AI is that you can give it a desired outcome and you don't have to tell it exactly which path or which rule to follow to achieve that outcome. And that can lead in a lot of cases with, a lot of caveats like the right training, the right data, can lead to really interesting outcomes that are just fundamentally impossible with traditional software.
Yeah, thank you. Have either of you seen any tools in other languages that have other language besides English? I feel like that's a big barrier for many of the folks marketers interested all over the world.
So I will say for generative AI, when it comes to text, don't quote me on this, but I would try some of the tools out there just using whatever your own language is, because some of these models they've actually found have gotten pretty good at other languages, even though they were only trained on English. So, which is a very strange and weird development and shows you some of the power of these models. I would honestly go start looking into, I believe you can use things like GPT-4 with other languages, but you'd have to fact check me on that. But I would try out some of the typical writing tools in your own language, like with your prompt, and see if you're able to make it usable that way.
Yeah, I thought
Diego said it absolutely works in many languages.
Yeah, I thought it did too. Yeah.
Okay, so Mike, someone asked, with what Mike just said, that none of the links worked when you were talking about how you were trying to pull that list of 10. Doesn't it show that ChatGPT is not good? Can you explain why it still is?
No,
good?
for sure. Yeah. It should. I would argue it does. Sorry, I lost my mic for a second. I would argue that it doesn't show necessarily a ChatGPT is bad. It shows what ChatGPT is not good at today. You should not be using it to source information. You should not be using it to cite facts for you. it's just not good at it. I mean, really, when you think about it, ChatGPT is really just predicting what it thinks sounds good. It's predicting, it's not going and researching. Now that's changing a bit with some of the plugins, with the browser functionality in ChatGPT. I think we'll solve for this problem a little faster than we think, but I would agree. I think it highlights a very strong limitation of the technology that I don't think you can throw out the entire tool personally, but you do have to be really aware that something that looks really, really solid could be complete nonsense.
Well, can we just remind people also that, there's ChatGPT, which is on GPT-3, and then there's GPT-4, right? And neither of them go out and search the internet, right?
Yeah.
You have, for GPT-4, it's paid. You have to get into the plugins, and then you can have them go out and search the internet and get data. But this data, people using ChatGPT and even GPT-4, and they're not using any plugins that search the internet. I mean, it's only trained up to 2021 anyways. Yep. So it's not researching the internet. It's all old data. So definitely something to keep in mind. Go for the paid version for that if you're looking for it to search the internet.
What are some job titles you've seen, if either of you have seen, related to artificial intelligence in marketing?
For me personally, I've seen like the AI marketing specialist or manager titles. I can't say I've seen a ton of them. I haven't really been going and looking for them. I have seen a marked increase in the skills being mentioned. Things like, hey, you should have a familiarity with marketing AI technology. A lot of people use prompt engineering these days in listings I've seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's in the titles. I would say it's more in the description of the role.
Right. So someone asked, I keep hearing about its use in strategy, but how is confidentiality being covered so you don't end up like Samsung? Most companies are not allowing use of AI for that reason.
I mean, not all companies. So if you're using a company that's leveraging another tool like GPT or something like that, then you are basically under that company's, OpenAI or whoever's privacy policy, and whether or not you as a company can ask them to not include your data, but the company you're doing business with, you should see that. But if you look at companies that have their own proprietary AI, like Intellimize has their own proprietary AI, Writer has their own proprietary AI, right? Those companies are not sharing their data anywhere, right? Because it's their AI, so there's nothing to share. I think that's super important to understand where that comes from, and it sort of does mitigate that. And also, all these companies should be SOC 2 Type 2 compliant from a privacy perspective.
Mike, do you have anything to add on that one?
No, I would just say that makes a lot of sense. I think you also have to just think about, I mean, maybe I'm taking too broad of a definition of strategy here. Even if you can't use all of your own data, what's to say you can't be using these tools to check your own thinking? When you say, like, for instance, Cathy, you and I came from an agency background. I mean, I would have killed to have a tool like this when saying, hey, here's a hypothetical. I've got a client that wants 10,000 leads by the end of the year. Here's their budget. Here's their constraints. Here's the channels they are and aren't familiar with. Here's how our team, our skills, just feed in hypotheticals and have it start kind of stress testing my thinking. It doesn't mean it'll all be right, but I use it daily for that purpose today, to just, what am I not thinking about? I think I see that as strategic use. You might not be able to snap your fingers and pump out a really in-depth corporate strategy based on your market data, your sales data, stuff like that. That very rightly so is going to create some problems. But I think for your own strategic thinking in your job, or even building strategies that don't require that data, I think it's pretty interesting to think about.
Absolutely. Well, Tracy, we're so grateful for your time, and it's 1:03, and I just looked at the clock. So that hour went lightning fast, and we are over. So I'm going to end the webinar. We have lots of questions. Tracy, I'll send them to you if your team wants to follow up with anybody. Sure. And thank you everyone so much for coming. And you'll be receiving the video and the, what am I missing?
Presentation. Yeah.
Hopefully today, if not first thing tomorrow morning. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tracy. And we'll see everyone soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.